Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel SK Tech. In today's video, we are going to see example of functional interface. We have already seen what is functional interface, what are the built-in functional interface provided by the Java 7 and what are the functional interface provided by the Java 8. Okay, and we have already seen some couple of the example in our previous video. I am going to share the video link, so do check out for more information. But in this video, we are going to see some couple of more example like functional interface, supplier functional interface, consumer, BiFunction, BiConsumer and BiPredicate. There could be a like typo. These are some couple of the functional interface provided by as part of the Java 8 and we are going to see one by one. Okay, so now let's go to the IntelliJ IDE and try to see. So these are the class that we have created as part of the previous video, and where we have seen some couple of the example of the functional interface, and we have seen like what is the use of functional interface. So basically, what are the functional interface provided by the Java 8 itself? What is the main uses? So when we have any kinds of requirement where we want to create our own custom functional interface, like we will see how to create it, where need to create the functional interface and we want to provide the implementation. So we need to check, is there any already functional interface provided by the Java itself which is going to serve the same purpose. Like in case of the functional interface, we have seen there is a method called apply, right? That's what we are trying to call it here, apply, which is expecting like one types of the argument and going to return the another type of the argument. And we have seen like what is the real-time use case, like how to convert like centigrade to Fahrenheit, and also we have seen string to an integer conversion. Similar to that, we are going to see one more example of real-time entity. Okay, so like how the real-time it is work in our project. So let's say we have couple of the time we have a requirement to convert some DTO type to the entity type. So what is the DTO type? DTO type is nothing but it's like a data transfer. So we will be having one class which is basically used to transfer the data from one layer to another layer. And there is another class similar to the DTO which is called as an entity, and those class is basically used to store the data in the database. So that is entity class would be the main class, but DTO class would be the temporary class which is basically used to transfer the data from one layer to another layer, and entity class is the main class which is going to use to persist the data in the database. So we will see, let's say we have a requirement to transfer from one type, from DTO type to the entity type, how we can do that. So again we have seen here like what we are talking about is like we want to convert one type to another type. It means we want to provide one type of the argument and we want to return another type. So if we have such requirement where we want to pass one type and want to return another type, doing some operation, like in case of we are going to convert it, it can be like some other operation also. But when we have a requirement, when we want to pass as a one type of the argument and want to return another type, in those kinds of scenario we can use functional interface. Okay, because functional interface is going to provide one method that is called abstract method basically, and it is like going to accept one type and it is going to return another type. That's what we have seen here in case of centigrade to Fahrenheit conversion, in case of string to an integer conversion. Similar to that, we are going to see how it is really used in our day-to-day or in a real-time example. Okay, so let's create one main method and we are going to perform like convert DTO type to entity type. So this is something like one POSO class would be there. We will see more detail about what is DTO type, what is entity type in part of the spring discussion. So we are going to start one new season also where we are going to discuss all the spring concept, spring boot concept and REST API. Okay, so let's try to see. So let's try to simulate it. Let's say we have one DTO class, something like, let's say we have a class called person DTO, and let's say this class hold two informations like private string name, private, int age, and we have, let's say we have a constructor. Let's try to create using the generative option. Constructor, let's use all argument constructor, and let's also try to create setter and getter of all the variable. Okay, so this is how the DTO class would be look like. We will be having one class, we'll be having some set of the field, setter and getter and constructor. And let's try to create the entity class, how it is going to be look like. So entity class is also going to be look like same, like we will be having, let's say, class person entity, and here also it could be this similar data types like this, string name, age, and let's try to create constructor here also, and let's try to create the setter and getter here also. So this is how the entity class would be look like, and this is how the DTO class would be look like. So you will see that it is looks like similar, right? But this will not be the case. Basically the entity class will have some annotation like related to the hibernate or related to the JPA, like @table, @column, and all those information would be there in case of the entity. But in case of the DTO, it will be simple POJO class where it will be having set of the fields, constructor and setter getter. So this class basically which is going to use for the data transfer from one layer to another layer, let's say controller layer to service layer to JPA, or you can say data layer. And this class is going to use actually to persist the data in the database. So let's say we have this kinds of the requirement where we want to convert one type to another type. Set of the field should be exactly same, or it could be different also. We will see. Let's say in this case this is same. So since we have a requirement to convert one type to another type, so we can create our own constructor, we can define our own method which is going to accept one input type and going to return another input type. Or what we can do, we can see is there any already functional interface provided by the Java which is going to serve the same purpose. So yes, in this case we know that functional interface is the interface is going to provide one apply method, right, which is going to accept one type like T type. That could be anything, like in this case it's going to be a person DTO. We have seen also like it is can be a person type or an integer type, and return type is going to be another type. It can be anything, like say in this case it is going to be person entity. We have already seen how it can be integer to string to integer, and here integer to double. Similar to that, it can be have a person type to, or you can say person DTO type to person entity. Okay, so we have a similar requirement, right, where we want to convert one type to another type. So we can use the functional interface and we can provide the implementation using the lambda expression, and we can perform the operation. Okay, so how we can do that? Let's try to write some logic here. So let's say, so let's try to implement the functional interface. So how we can do the implementation? So first we need to write the functional interface here, like function, right? And here we need to provide the two type, like which types to which type we want to convert. So we want to convert like person DTO type, so we need to provide like person DTO type to person entity type. So here we need to provide person entity type, right? And then we need to create the object, let's say any object like function itself, and here we need to write the lambda expression. So what is the basic lambda expression? So that is nothing but the braces, then arrow token and the body of the lambda. This is what the basic syntax would be look like for the lambda, and using that we will be able to provide the implementation that we want to perform here. So let's say this method, or you can say function, it is going to contain as apply method. It is having a one argument, right, of that T type. So T type is nothing but the first argument. So this is how it is going to be look like. Let's say entity, okay, or you can say like DTO, because we want to convert from DTO to entity type, right? And using this object we will be perform the operation, conversion logic. So what could be the conversion logic? It's very simple. What we can do, we can write the implementation like this. Let's say it is going to return of a new person entity, right? And here what we can do, this is very simple logic, like we are going to use this object going to create the new person entity and going to get all the information from this field and going to pass to this class. So what could be the name? So the first name is like get name and DTO dot get age. So this should be the simple logic for converging the person DTO to person entity, right? This is how we can provide the implementation, and then if we want to use it, how we can do that? So what we need to do, we need to use like this. So we need to use the function, then we need to call the apply here, and here what we need to provide the input. So input should be the first type like this. So let's try to provide the implementation here. So let's say we have like new person DTO and we have a name like, let's say SKTech 9521, that is nothing but our channel name, and then age, let's say 30. So what it is going to do, it is going to call this implementation of this, because we are using this function object, right? So going to call this implementation, it is going to convert it and going to return the person entity type, that is nothing but the another type. So what we can do, we can hold it, or if we want to print it, we can directly print it also. So let's try to hold it for now, because this is how we are going to use in our real-time example. So it could be like a person entity, right? And if you want to print the object of any object, so we can directly print it if we have the toString implementation. Otherwise it is going to print the object. Or another way is like we can print each of the field using this sysout statement like this. Let's say this object itself, person entity, and we are going to perform the information. So let's say we are going to perform, or it would be simpler if you have override, or it would be have a simpler if you have override toString method itself. So let's try to override the toString method here, so that whenever we are going to print the object of the person entity, it is going to print in this format. So let's try to implement the toString method. This would be the simpler one, instead of calling all get and set and then we are printing it in the sysout statement. So now what we can do, we simply use the sysout statement, and here we can write like person entity, and here we can append the person entity. Okay, so when you run this program, what it is going to do, it is going to call this function. It is going to convert from person DTO to person entity type, because here we have passed person DTO type, and it is going to return person entity type. So this is the real-time example usually used in our day-to-day project. When you are going to work, you will see more example of this. Okay, now let's try to run this program and see the output. So yeah, you can see that what types of it is printing. It is printing like person entity, and we have passed like person DTO. So it is converting it, it is returning the person entity type and printing all the information that is present inside the person entity class. Since we have overridden the toString method here, so it is printing in this format, right? So this is the another real-time example where we can use the functional interface. Okay, now let's move ahead and see the some other functional interface provided by the Java 8. So what are those functional interface? Let's go to the slide and see the next example. So these are some couple of examples that we are performing. So we have performed like predicate functional interface, we have performed like function functional interface. Now we are going to see supplier functional interface. So what is supplier functional interface? So as the name suggests, since it is going to be a functional interface, it means this is also going to contain exactly one abstract method, and it is going to do some operation, or so that operation would be defined based on the name itself. So like in case of the predicate, it's like going to predict something, it is true or false. That's what we have seen. It is having a test method, right? It is going to return true or false in a boolean format. In case of functional interface, it is times of a function. So what function will do, it will accept some argument, and it is going to return some different types of the argument. That's what we have seen just now, apply method. Similar to that, supply. So supply means we are going to supply something. So it means that it will be also having exactly one abstract method which does not require any argument, but it is going to return something. Because as the name suggests, it is going to be a supplier functional interface. Supplier means it is going to supply something, but it don't require anything. So if we have a requirement where we want to create the functional interface of type supplier, okay, so let's try to first create the custom one. So how we can create the custom one? So let's say we have a interface, let's say supply, or it could be anything interface. Okay, let's say we have a requirement to define something like get object or get age. Okay, and here let's say it is going to return as a, let's say, of t type. So t type means, let's say, some, it could be anything, let's say int type, like this. So let's say we have a requirement where we want to create one functional interface. Functional interface means going to be exactly one abstract method, and the implementation of the, or you can say definition of the abstract method is looking like this. So instead of creating this and providing the implementation in our traditional way, like creating the class, implementing this interface, providing the implementation of this, or using the lambda expression, providing the implementation, we can see, is there any interface provided by the Java already which is going to get the same types of the abstract method? If it is yes, so instead of creating our own, we can directly use it, because Java provided lots of functional interface which is having different kinds of the method. Like in case of test we have seen, like in case of predicate we have seen it is having test method. In case of function we have seen it is having apply method. Similar to that, there is another functional interface that is called supplier functional interface, that is going to provide one get method. So we can see directly here also. Let's try to print some out statement to separate it out first. This one, let's write some statement like supplier, okay, functional interface. So let's type here like supplier, so we will be able to see the method of the supplier. So it should be like supplier. So if you go inside the class, you will see there is a method called get, and syntax of the get is nothing but what types of the supplier that you are creating. Okay, so that type is going to be returned, but it is not going to accept anything. So this is another functional interface provided by the Java. If we have a requirement to create similar types of the functional interface, so instead of creating our own, we can directly use it. So in which scenario we can use this one? So this is useful when we want to, let's say, want to get some data from any of the object. So if we have seen here the person object, right, we are having some getter object. So what this is something like supplier interface only. I mean abstract method of the supplier only, because here it is not expecting anything, but still it is returning some string type, right? Similar to that, let's say we have a requirement where we want to get the some information of the any person object or any object. Okay, so in those kinds of scenario, either we can create our own functional interface, provide the implementation, or we can use the Java provided supplier interface. So let's see how we can provide the implementation. So let's say we want to use the supplier interface of type person itself, or you can say person DTU. It could be anything. Let's say we are going to reuse this class. So we can create like this. So this is the supplier interface, and here we can create the object. And here we need to provide the implementation of the method which is available inside this class. Okay, inside this functional interface. So what is the method? So that is nothing but the get method only. And you see the syntax of the get method, that is like 0 argument. So what we need to do? First we need to write the lambda expression, simple lambda expression. So what is the syntax for the simple lambda expression? This is how it is look like. Then we need to provide the implementation of the method, right? So you can see that get method, it is having 0 argument, it does not require any argument, but still it is going to return something, right? So let's see how we can provide the implementation. So we can provide the implementation something like this: return new person DTU, and here let's say we are providing like Java, let's say age is like 21, and here we can write like terminate. Okay, so you see that here this supplier implementation, it is like something when we want to return something but we don't want to provide any argument. So let's say we want to get the person DTU type object, some object we have provided here, and those object we want to get it. Okay, and here we are not providing any argument. So in those kinds of scenario, we can use this supplier interface. So we will see more example in next upcoming video, or as day by day, like when we are seeing that stream API, there also will use some couple of the supplier, predicate, functional interface like that. Now let's try to use the supplier functional interface and see the output. So let's try to directly print it. So what we can do inside the DTO also, let's try to implement the toString method. So it will be more visible, or you can say it will be more meaningful way it is going to print it. Okay, so let's try to implement this using this generate option only. So toString all variable. Okay, now here if we can print it, what we can see, supplier, and here we can append it like supplier dot get, and that's it. So you see that this get method, what it is going to do, it is going to see what is the implementation of the supplier, what is the useful of this get method. So basically it is seeing that okay, it is of type %DTU, and we see the implementation. What is the implementation? So basically it is going to return the %DTU object. Okay, so if you run this program, you will see that it is going to print %DTU object. What are the values that we have provided it here? Okay, so you can see that it is printing like %DTU object and this. So whenever we have requirement, whenever we have such requirement where we want to get something without providing any argument, so we can use the supplier interface, provide the implementation something like this, and we can use it. Okay, and also we can simplify this expression also. We know that how to simplify it. We have already seen in our previous video step by step how we can simplify it, right? One by one, how can remove the expression, then curly braces, return statement, like that. So let's try to remove it here itself. So what you can do, since this is a one statement, we can remove this return statement, right? And also since this is having a one statement, then this curly braces is also optional. So if you run this program, this is also going to print same. Yeah. So now for now going forward, we are going to use optimize lambda expression, and we'll try to understand the optimized syntax only, because we have already seen the step by step. So if you want to go again the step by step concept, do check out my previous video. But now going forward, we are going to see if it is having a one argument, we are not going to use this expression itself like this braces, or if it is having a two argument, how we can do that, how we can remove the data type. Okay, so this is about the supplier interface. Similar to the supplier interface, there is another functional interface is like consumer. So similar to the supplier, it was like returning something, but it was not expecting anything. Similar to that, consumer means it is also a functional interface. It is also going to contain exactly one abstract method, and those abstract method, it is going to accept some input, but it is not going to return anything. So that is meaning of the consumer. It is going to consume. It means that what are the input that you are providing, based on the input, it is going to perform the operation there itself, and it is not going to return it. So when we have such requirement where we want to create the functional interface of consumer type, where we want to define any method of type any argument and does not require anything, it means let's say we have a white type. So instead of creating our own, we can directly use Java provided. So let's try to create first how we can create our own, then we will see how we can use the Java one. So let's say we have like consumer interface. So let's say we have something like consumer, like it is going to expect something, let's say string, or let's say object type like %DTU, and not going to return anything. So let's say if we want to create these types of the functional interface in any of the requirement, so instead of creating our own functional interface and providing the implementation either with the traditional way or with the lambda expression, we can see is there any interface provided with Java which is going to serve the same purpose. It means which is going to provide these kinds of the implementation. Then we can, instead of creating our own, we can directly use it. So supplier is a kind of the interface. It is also going to provide one abstract method which is going to expect some argument, but it is not going to return anything. So let's see how the supplier interface is look like. So first let's try to print some statement here to differentiate it. So let's say now it is consumer interface. Let's type the consumer interface here. So consumer, okay, and now go inside that. We will see that it is having one method called accept, and it is asking like one argument type, like one object type as T, means it can be anything like %DTU, person entity, person, employee, any types of the object, and it is not going to return anything. So if we have these kinds of the functional interface, instead of creating our own, we can use it. Now let's try to use this consumer interface and provide some implementation. Okay, so how we can use that consumer interface? So let's say we want to demonstrate using the consumer interface, like, so let's see how, in which scenario we can use the consumer interface. So we have seen that syntax of this. So in one understanding we got, like when we have these kinds of the functional interface definition, when instead of creating our own, we can directly use the Java provided one. And now we are going to see in which scenario we can use that. So let's say we have a list of person entity, okay, or you can say person, it can be anything. So let's say we have some person, we know that there is a class called person we have already created as part of the previous video. Let's try to import this one, okay, and let's give name like person DTO, like this, and we are going to create like new array list and going to add list of the person here. So how we can add the list of the person object? It's very simple, person list dot add, and here we need to provide like new person. So what is the syntax, or you can say constructor? So it is expecting like age and name. So let's try to add some age and name, like let's say 20 learn. It could be anything, I'm just giving some example like learn with Java SKTech, like that. So I'm going to add some couple of the more example here, like let's say 21 or 22, 24 learn with SKTech 9521. Just I'm giving my channel name so that it will be like, we need to know like what is the channel name. That is nothing but just for the example. Okay, so let's say we have this list of the person and we want to print it, or you can say we want to iterate each of the person and we want to print it. So in a traditional one, how we can do that? So it is very simple, we can use any of the looping concept, let's say for each. So this is the syntax for the for each, right? So here we need to provide the list of the person object, and this is going to return one types of the person because it is storing person type, right? So we need to write person. So let's say we want to iterate all this list and we want to print only age. So this is our requirement. We have a list of the person object, we want to iterate it and we want to print only the age. Okay, so this is like before using the consumer. Then we will see with the help of the consumer how this could be simplified. Okay, so what we can do, we can write something like person, let's write some statement also, person age. Okay, and let's try to use this object and get the age. Let's say this is our requirement, or we can print both the information also. Let's try to use like person info, and here we are going to see age and then comma, it can be anything. Let's say we are going to give comma and name, right? And here we can use the same object to get the name also, right? So this is how, let's say we want to iterate it and we want to print it. So this is how we use the for each loop to print it, right? Any of the list of the object. So what we are trying to do here is like we are supplying some input. So what we are supplying input here is like person list, and we want to perform something and print it. It means that this method is not going to return anything, or you can say this loop, it is not going to return anything. It is going to expect some list of the person object and it is going to print it. So let's say we have this requirement, so we can use another for each also, like we have seen in case of the lambda, right? So what we can do, let's try to use that one also. So we need to write like for each, or you can say for each, and here we can write the object like person, and using this curly braces we can write the same statement. So let's say right now we are going to use sysout person. So in this way also we can print it, right? And now let's try to simplify this now here only, since this is having a one statement. So this curly braces is completely optional, right? So in this way also we can write it and we can print it. So what we are observing here, like if we have this requirement, it is expecting some list of the person object, it is doing some operation like iterating it and printing it each of the object. So it is means, you can see here it is kinds of a consumer only, right? It is expecting some argument but not returning anything, something like this. it is expecting some object doing some operation but not returning anything. Return type is optional. So in those kinds of scenario, instead of using this, we can use the consumer interface, provide the implementation and achieve the same goal. So let's try to run this program first and see the output. Then we will see how we can do that using the consumer. So you see that it is printing here person is person information, these three person information, and this is like using the first loop. Now let's try to see, since it is expecting some argument doing some operation, what are the operation that is doing, that does not matter. In this case it is simply printing it. It might perform some other operation, but the main goal is like it is not returning anything. So it is kinds of this interface only, right? So instead of writing this for each loop or this, we can use the consumer implementation and provide the implementation of consumer method using the lambda expression. How you can do that? To provide the implementation of any functional interface, first we need to write the functional interface name. So in this case like consumer, and then here we need to type what types of the data that we are going to supply to perform the operation or to provide the implementation. So we are going to supply like person type. Let's say we are going to create the consumer of person type, and what is the goal? So let's try to create the object, and here we need to provide the implementation. So let's try to provide the same implementation like how we are providing the implementation here. So same implementation we are going to provide it here. So what we can do, since it is having a one argument, we are going to use like directly object, and then we are going to perform the operation. So we are going to write like something sys.output and person object, and that's it. So let's say we have created this consumer. So we are going to use this consumer, provide the list of the object, and what this consumer is going to do, it is going to perform the output like whatever the implementation that we have written it here. So since here if you see, we are not writing any braces, not writing any curly braces, not writing any return statement. Since it is not having any return statement, so it is optional, right? So now we are going to write like in this optimized way only. We need to familiarize like how we are writing this. We have already seen step by step, and then we have also see how we can write like this. Okay, now let's try to use this consumer and provide some supplier, provide some person object. So this consumer is having accept method, right? That's what we have seen. It is expecting some type. So what type? The same type which we have created here. So we need to provide it here like new person and person object. Let's say age is like 31 and SK tech, and that's it. So what it is going to do, it is going to expect this accept this input and going to perform the operation which is written as part of the implementation of this consumer type. So if you run this program, you see that output of this object only. So you see here it is printing like age 31, name whatever the name it is there, SK tech, right? So this is the use of the consumer. So the overall, whenever we have any requirement to create this kinds of the functional interface where it is going to accept one argument and not going to return anything, like void type of the return type. So in those kinds of scenario, instead of creating this, we can directly use the consumer interface. So all these interfaces provided with Java is just that to, instead of creating our own custom interface, if we have similar requirement to create the similar abstract method, we can directly use the Java provided one, because this is like more useful. Like instead of creating our own, Java is already provided list of the functional interface. Okay, so this is about the consumer. Next example that we are going to see, let's write this statement first to separate it out. So next example that we are going to see is like BiFunctional interface. We have seen functional interface. Now we are going to see BiFunctional, BiConsumer and BiPredicate. So BiFunctional is nothing but is the same functional interface only. Like in case of the functional, it was having apply method which was expecting one argument and going to return another type of the argument. Similar to the functional interface, BiFunctional interface is going to accept more than one argument, like two argument, and going to return the third argument. Okay, so that is the extension of the functional interface, like BiFunctional interface. So let's write it here like BiFunctional functional interface. Okay, So let's try to see what is the method available. So basically it is going to have a same method. So what we can do, let's say we have a requirement similar to the functional interface. If we want to convert one type to the another type, we can go functional interface. So let's say we have a requirement like we have a two-person object. We want to create one in functional interface, something like, let's create first so that it will be more visible and clear. So let's say we are going to give the name as like BiFunction. Let's say we have a abstract method like int get, and here we are going to see like person p1, person p2. So let's say we have a requirement where we want to create one functional interface, and we are going to provide one abstract method like this. So and provide the implementation something like it is expecting two-person object, and it is going to get the age of the person object of each object, going to do the addition and going to return as a integer format. Okay, so if we have these kinds of the requirement, we can create our own. That is always a welcome, and provide the implementation either with the traditional one or the lambda expression. Or we can see, is there any interfunctional interface provided by the Java which is going to provide similar kinds of the abstract method, then we can directly use it instead of creating that. So this functional interface is nothing but similar to the BiFunctional interface only, which is provided by the Java. We will see how. So let's type it here like BiFunctional interface. So if you go inside that, you will see there is a method called apply, similar to the functional interface like functional interface. Now it is expecting two arguments, type T, type U, means it is of two different two object, and going to return the third one which is written here. So if you see that this is nothing but it is a type of R. So this is also similar to that, the one which we have created our own. So instead of creating our own, we can provide, or you can say we can use the existing provided by the Java functional interface, that is nothing but the BiFunctional, and we can directly start writing the implementation instead of creating this and doing the implementation. So let's see how we can provide the implementation. So what was the original requirement? We want to get the age of the person object from the two different person object. We want to do the addition and return it. So let's try to write the implementation of that. So how we can do that? First we need to write the functional interface name BiFunctional. Then here we need to provide the three argument. Two argument is going to be the input of the method, and third argument is going to be of the return type. So as per this only we can provide it here. Let's say person. Another object is also a type person. It's just that it types of the object, it can be anything. So in this example we are going to see two different types of the person object, and we want to return as an integer. So here we need to provide like integer like this, and then we need to name the name like BiFunction, and here we need to write the implementation. So the implementation of this BiFunctional interface is nothing but what are the function available inside here, what is the method, abstract method available here. This method implementation only we are going to write it here. So everywhere we have seen in case of consumer, this implementation is nothing but the method implementation available inside that, like accept, right? In case of supplier, get. In case of function, it is like apply with one type of the argument, another type of the return type. Similar to that, BiFunctional means two types of the argument, and third type is the return type. So what we can do, since it is expecting two types of the argument, right? So here we need to write like lambda expression. So first the syntax of the lambda expression, braces, arrow token, and then curly braces and terminate. So this is a simple lambda function expression, and now we need to write the implementation. So what is the input type? So this is the input type. So we need to copy it here. It should be like P1. It can be anything. This is just the variable name. P2. Okay, I think we have to write it here actually. And we are going to use this two variable, going to get the object, or can say get the age of the person, and going to do the addition and going to return it. So how we can do the return operation here? So we need to write like return p1 dot get age plus p2 dot get age. This is how the implementation is going to be look like. We are going to get the person object 1, person object 2 going to do the addition and going to return as an integer. So since this age is an integer type, so addition of this method or this operation is going to return as an integer. So this is how we can write it. And if you want to use it, what we can do, we need to use the like BiFunction apply method, because the original method available inside the BiFunction is like apply. It is going to accept two input. If you see here, T and U means person of 1 object, person 2 object. So how we can do that? We need to create like new person object. Here we need to provide like age, let's say SK and another object is also going to be person type only. So let's say 34 and let's say Java. This is the 2 person object that we have provided it here. This is a string type. 2 person object that we have provided here. What it is going to do, it is going to call the implementation of this BiFunctional. So what is the implementation? So it is going to accept as an argument of this type, going to get the age of from both of the object and going to do the addition and going to return it. So basically it is going to return as a integer. So what we need to write it here, the same output here. So either we can write like int age equal to this, and we can use the sysout statement to print it. Let's say person age from, or you can say total person age, right? We can give anything, just that it's a simple statement only, and here we are going to print like age. So if you run this program, you will see that it is going to get the age from this object and this object, going to do the addition and going to return the total age. So what it is printing, 21 plus 34 equal to 55. So this is the example of the BiFunctional. So basically whenever we have such requirement where we want to provide 2 input type and third is like a return type, so instead of creating our own functional interface, we can use the BiFunctional and directly write the implementation. So this implementation could be anything. Just for the demonstration purpose, I just written the logic like this, and also we are going to simplify it. So instead of this, we no need to provide any return type, or you can say data type, and this is also our single statement. So instead of providing this all the boilerplate code, we can simply replace with this. This is also going to do the same operation, and we have seen why we have written it, why we have written the unnecessary code, because that is the optional. But this braces is completely mandatory in case of the multiple argument. So see that it is also printing 55 only. Next example that we are going to see is like BiConsumer. So we have already seen what is the we have already seen the example of the consumer, right? So consumer means which will be having one method called get, which is expecting some argument, but it is not going to return anything, right? Similar to that, BiConsumer, what it is going to do, it is going to expect 2 argument as an input and not going to return anything. So similar like this. So let's try to create our own first, then we'll, instead of using this, we can use the Java provided one. So it is like consumer. Okay, so what it is going to do, it is expecting 2 argument and it is not going to return anything. So we have, let's say we have such requirement, so instead of creating our own, we can directly use the Java provided one. So in this case, BiConsumer. So BiConsumer method is also going to be the similar to the consumer only. So what is the method available at case of the consumer? So it was like get, I guess, right? Let's try to verify it. Okay, it is expecting, it is the method name is like accept. So the same method is going to be available in case of the BiConsumer also. So if you write here like BiConsumer, if you go inside that, it will be also having the accept method only. But now instead of expecting 1 argument, it is going to accept like 2 input argument and not going to return it. So let's see how we can do that, how we can use the BiConsumer. So let's see, in case of the consumer, what we are doing it here, like you are having in the requirement like to provide the person type object and do the printing operation, right? So it was like expecting 1 argument and not returning anything. What are the implementation written it here, it was doing the same operation. So in this case also, we are going to perform this similar operation. Let's say we have a 2 person object, we want to supply it, or you can say pass as an argument, and we want to print the output inside the method implementation only, and we don't want to return anything, something like implementation of this. So how we can use the BiConsumer? So same thing, like we need to provide the two argument type as per the syntax. So let's say we are providing like this only, like person1 and person2, two object, and let's give the name of the BiConsumer, and here we need to write the implementation. So first we need to write the lambda expression, because we are going to use the implementation based on the lambda expression only. So this is the lambda expression. Then we need to see what is the method available inside this. It is having a accept only, and it is expecting two argument. And what are those two argument? That is nothing but this argument only. So we are going to give the p1, p2. You see here we are not writing any person p1, person p2. Like we know that data type is optional, that's why we can give like person1, person2. It can be anything like x1, x2, but just it is a person type object, we are giving person1, person2. Okay, and here we are going to write the implementation. So what the implementation we need to write it here, since this method is expecting two input argument, not going to return it. So let's say we want to get the first person object and print it. So how we can do that? Let's try to write the system sysout statement like p1. So here we can see, here we can write like person1 object and person2 object. Let's say we have requirement like this. So we can use this BiConsumer whenever we want to perform some these kinds of the operation, like we are expecting some argument, we are doing the operation there only instead of returning it. So in this case, let's say we want to print it. So we have written something, this statement. So let's say we have a multiple statement. We have already seen multiple times like it was having single argument or single statement, right? Now in this case it is having like multiple argument, multiple statement. So in this case this curly braces can be mandatory. Okay, so this is how we can use the BiConsumer. Now let's try to use that. So BiConsumer dot accept, and here we need to provide the two person object. Let's try to use the same person object that we have given it here, person this and this, and that's it. Let's write this program and see the output. What it is going to do, it is going to call the implementation of this consumer, and that is nothing but this. So it is going to accept as this argument and this argument, and going to perform the operation. So what it is going to do, it is going to accept as an argument of this type and going to perform the operation which is written it here. So since we are doing something like simple sysout statement, so if you run this program, it is going to print this output. So let's run this program and see the output. So we have already run that. You see the output here, it is simply printing it. So this is the example of the BiConsumer. Similar to that, the next example that we want to perform is like BiPredicate. So we have already seen what is the predicate interface, right? Predicate functional interface. So let's try to demonstrate with the BiPredicate also. What was the predicate functional interface? So basically when we have a requirement like this, when we have a functional interface where we want to return as a boolean type, okay, and we want to pass like one person object p1, okay. So let's give the name as a BiPredicate. When we have a requirement like, let's say we have a method called get, where we are going to perform some checking operation and going to return the boolean type, either it is true or not. That was the example of in case of the predicate. But in case of the BiPredicate, it is going to provide the same method only, but it is going to accept two argument. Okay, so let's say we have a requirement like this, p1, p2. So if we have a requirement to create this kinds of the functional interface, instead of creating that and providing the check operation, we can directly use the BiPredicate function. So we see that if you write it here like BiPredicate function, if you go inside that, you will see there is a method called test. It is expecting two argument and returning true or false. So what are the scenario we can use this function? Let's say we have a requirement where we want to test the equality of two objects, and based on the equality it is going to return true or false. Let's say we have a two string, we want to check that both the string are true or not. Okay, so in those kinds of scenario we can use the BiPredicate. So what we are going to do, we are going to check two string as argument and going to write the logic to provide like checking operation, both the string is true or not, means both the string is equal or not. Based on that, it is going to return true or false. Okay, so how we can provide the implementation? Since we want to perform the operation on the string, like we have written here like person. So in this case, we want to provide the implementation, so this is going to be a person type. But in this example, we are going to perform the operation on the string, so we need to provide the string type only. So let's say first string like string, and another one is also is going to be a string. So this predicate function basically going to accept as a two string input and going to perform the logic that we are going to write it here. So let's write the name like BiPredicate, and here we need to write the lambda expression to perform those operations. So what is the syntax? Since this is having two arguments, so instead of writing string s1 comma string s2, what we can do, we can simply write like s1 comma s2, because we know that our data type is completely optional, right? And then we need to write the arrow token, then curly braces, and then terminate it. And here we need to write the our formula or our logic to check that both the string is true or not. So how we can check like both the string is equal or not? So there is a method called equals. Using that we can do that. So let's write like return s1 dot equals s2, and like this. So instead of that, we know that this is completely optional. Let's try to remove it. So this is how we can write it. So this BiPredicate function is written like when we providing the two argument type as a string, it is going to check both the string is true or not, and both the string is equals or not. If it is equals, it is going to return true. If it is not equal, it is going to return false. Let's try to use it. How we can use that? We can use like BiPredicate. Then what is the method? That is nothing but the test, and here we need to provide the actual value of this string. So what is, let's say we are going to provide like sk take, okay, and next string we are going to provide like sk, where s is capital and t is capital, and we are going to see this both the string are true or not. So what do you see? This two string is different, right? So what is the return type it is going to return? It is going to return is false. Let's try to print it. So let's write the scissor statement, and inside that only let's write some statement here like s1 and s2 equal question mark. Is it equal or not? Let's try to check it. Let's run this program and see the output. Okay, so there is some syntax error. What is that syntax error? Okay, it is expecting one more braces. Let's run this program and see the output again. So see that what it is printing? It is printing like both s1 and s2 is not equal. It is printing false. Let's try to give the same input only and run this program. Okay, so we have copied something else, sk take and sk take. Let's run this program and see the output. Yeah, so now it is printing true. So you see that when we can use the BiPredicate, when we have a two argument type of a function and we want to perform some operation, and based on the operation when we want to return the boolean type. So instead of creating our own functional function interface, and providing the implementation either with the traditional one or using the lambda expression, we can directly use this BiPredicate function only, and we can directly provide the implementation something like this, right? And then we can use it. So in this case we have checked like both the provided string is equal or not. So this is the example of the BiPredicate function interface. Okay, there is more important concept about the functional interface is like static method and default method. We have seen like inside the functional interface it can be a multiple static method and multiple default method. So what is default method and static method, that we are going to discuss in a separate video in detail. So for example, just for the demonstration purpose, I'm just trying to see it here like this is the Java provided functional interface, right? Here also if you see there is a default method, and there is a default three default method available. It's not a mandatory, but it can have multiple default method and multiple static method. So in some cases it might be having some static method also, but now here it is like only default method. So we will see what is the default method and static method inside the functional interface in detail in separate video. So that's all for today's video. Till now, if you have any question or any doubt, do let me know in the comment section. I'll try to reply as soon as possible. Thank you.